Hello everybody. Evan Abrams here. Some video creative challenges for you. Today, I'm here to talk to you about Rotobrush 3. So this is kind of a Rotobrush 3 101. We're going to be getting into the basics of rotoscoping kind of generally, how to use the new Rotobrush 3 propagation module. And don't worry, if you have never, ever used rotobrushing, rotoscoping, any of that stuff, we're going to take it back to basics. I'm going to try to explain how the tool kind of works so we can kind of get the most out of it. That's what we got to do. So please bear with me. We're going to get into it. Let me show you the screen. We'll see what we're working towards for this entire week. Day 1, day 2, day 3. We're going to take it in phases to create this little piece here. So today we're going to be focusing on the extraction of the human element from the video, which I tend to want to put as much humanity into a video as we can, but in this case, we need to cut the subject out so that we can put things in behind them. So for example, in this case, if we want to put this floating, we'll say, Italian-American plumber style cube back there, then we need to isolate this person, this subject, so that we can put stuff behind there. Now, unfortunately, I mean, this is from Adobe stock. It looks kind of like a cross between Gus and I, but it's not. This is an actor. This is a paid actor. But if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Hello, everybody hanging out in the chat. Katarina, hello. Clever Devlin. That's right. That's right, Christy. So we're gonna have a lot of binary, a lot of stuff going on in here, and it's gonna be great. Joka, hello. Hey, what's going on, Rick H? This is gonna be great. So yeah, let me know where you're from. Reverb Mike, hello, and Sean, holding it down. This is great. CJ, keeping things honest in the chat. This is great. So, like I say, if you have any troubles, let me know. I'm gonna try to address some of the problems that a lot of people have when rotoing stuff. If you want to jump into the files, those are gonna be available at a link found in the description. And yeah, it's gonna be a good time. So let's start at the beginning. Right, we need to cut this person out because we want to put some rings behind their legs, or we want to put some cubes back here, right? And so tomorrow we're going to work on the 3D stuff. Today we're going to work on the two-dimensional cutting out of stuff. So if we take it back to basics, here's kind of a stripped down version of that scene, and we have here the kind of core elements that we want to extract for today. So let me just go ahead and solo these up for us so that we can observe them. And of course, like I say, always let me know. Let me know if you can't see anything, if anything's not clear. We have in the background the clean plate. This is literally just the footage that we are bringing to the situation. This is what we brought in. Then I'm going to try to extract the person. So here they are. We're on the transparent background. You can see right here, they're kind of floating through space. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And there are going to be some trouble areas that we're going to try to address. But then we're going to try to extract the skateboard as well. Now, the reason we don't tend to need to keep all of this together, and maybe you don't even want to keep it all together, is that the spot treatments that we need to apply and the type of settings that we need to do to this person on the skateboard is very different than what we're going to be doing to the board, because it's moving around quite a lot while the body is remaining stable. So these two elements are a little bit in conflict with each other when we're thinking about what kind of settings we're applying to them generally, but they also require a different sort of level of attention and detail when we're really diving into them. So we're going to get into that too. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's say this is your project. You're starting it from scratch. We want to just import our footage and we just drag that onto the new composition down at the bottom, underneath my face, down there. So the bottom of this window, sometimes this window will be smaller when you're working. But by dragging it on there, we've now created a composition that is the same size, frame rate, everything of that footage. And your first job is to trim the footage. You want to trim the footage down to just the areas that we need. And I think that we're going to go, let's see, they're doing a bit of a kick, but let's start our journey here. So you can just slide the front here, holding down shift will snap that trim right there. And then they're going to give a kick, and maybe we call it a day around like 5 seconds. 5 seconds is quite enough. So I like to go option square bracket, and that'll trim it right here. But really, we can trim the whole composition here. So I'll hit N to bring our workspace nice and tight, and then I will trim the comp to the work area. This trimming process that you do, you don't want to trim too much, you don't want to trim too little, because we're about to do processes that are a little bit destructive, meaning it's hard to go back once we have gone forward. So that is because we are going to be freezing, locking down, extracting data. And if we don't, for example, take enough, if there were frames after this, if we wanted an extra second, it's hard to tack those on later. And similarly, if we didn't start soon enough, it's hard to go back for that. So if you're doing effects work, generally our kind of guidepost is to say, let's take 2 seconds longer on either end of the clip than we require. And that will give you the pad in the edit to shift back and forth if you require. However, that means at 24 frames per second, we're talking about 48 frames on either end. So that can be a lot of work, right? So just be aware of those things. Usually we want to lock down our edit before we go into the effects work so that you know precisely these are the frames I must affect, and that's what we're going to work on. So, long story short, we need to put something behind this person. So we're going to make the sandwich a classic roto sandwich. So I just like to type out some words, type out the word stuff. I'm going to make sure that we are looking at a full resolution of this. So if you come down to your composition window, you want to make sure that you're looking at full res on here. And I'm just going to put the word stuff. And if we want stuff to be between the person and the background, I'm going to rename this, hitting enter, clean plate. Coming up after Thanksgiving here in terms of recording, so I hope lots of clean plates out there. And don't worry, Sean, I will not assault you guys with any more maths. There will be no more maths coming at you here. I promise. So this I'm going to rename to subject. And we now need to remove everything that we don't want here. So come up to our Rotobrush tool. If you click and hold on it, you're going to find the Rotobrush and the Refine Edge. We'll talk about the Refine Edge a little bit more down the road, but we grab the Rotobrush tool, and our cursor hasn't changed. That's because you need to double click, and we enter into layer mode. Now you can tell that the composition interface has changed a little bit, but if you go back here, this is our composition. It's got the 3 layers. Go into the layer, and you see we've got this bar down at the bottom, and up at the top it says layer, and we've got this solid bar under here. We know we're in the layer mode. When you look at that, I got a little green target. I can make the target bigger or smaller if I hold down Command and drag. And I want this to be fairly large. So I'll go like this, and I'm just going to paint onto the person, right? And you want to make sure that you're not catching a lot of the background. So I'm just going to go blorp like that. Ooh, that's a good one. And we're being pretty general. Not going to lie, we're being pretty general with this. So let's get onto the sleeve there. Maybe we get down into the legs like this. Let's get a little bit smaller and get into the leg down here, this leg and that leg. Oops, this void here in the middle, that's not good. We don't want that one. We don't want this space. So how are we going to do that? Well, I'm going to hold down Option, and that's going to give us the negative. And I just do a little paint in there, and you can see that we have now made that negative. So let's paint onto the shoe. Paint onto the shoe, and oh my goodness, there's a lot of like wheels and stuff. We have to make some hard choices down there. I don't want to do that, so let's move on and try to clean up the rest of this stuff. So I'm going to remove this, remove that. It's getting pretty nice and tight on the jacket. Let's get this hand. Ooh, nice grab on the hand. Congratulations, self. I'll just remind it about the shoulder here, and then I'll remind it about areas, not shoulder. Make sure the face is nice and good. And you'll notice we're taking nice, big, broad strokes in here. We're not being too specific. For example, I'm not going to worry a whole lot that this corner didn't grab. Like you could get really tiny and you just paint in like this, and you see we're extending a little bit more into the corner. That's a little bit overkill, right? It's a little bit too much. And then similarly, we might come down here and say, oh, well, let's really try to refine this up into this crack as much as we can. Oh, we're losing this part of the pants. So really the broad shapes are what you want. You want to go big, and you want these to be generally working out, right? But one critical thing that you want to think about is, when have I started painting? So you can see down here on the timeline, this gray area. These are called spans. This is a span. And I have created now a span that runs the length of the clip. So all of the frames of the clip are covered by the span. But the key frame, the frame from which Rotobrush 3 will be propagating, and you want to make sure that your version of Rotobrush is on 3 when we start to do a little propagating. We're going to propagate away from this. We're going to move away from this frame. So if I click ahead in time, say around 2 seconds, Rotobrush 3 initializing Adobe Sensei propagation module. It's talking to the module. They're talking back. It's sending a bunch of frames. We're going to start to work together. But what we're doing, there it's going. It's doing stuff. What it's doing is it's trying to figure out from frame to frame, what is the next logical thing that should happen with the pixels that I have selected. One thing I want to point out, this is where Rotobrush 3 is probably better than 2 and far better than 1, is where it analyzes voids. So you can see here, this void, this space where the shoes, the legs are coming together, right? And then that void seems to disappear because as the legs cross each other, it goes away. But then it comes back. So it's remembering, hey, these legs are what you are interested in. I'm not interested in the space in the middle because I already told it about that. It's remembering that information. So that is a pretty critical bit to think about. But overall, it's doing a pretty good job. But some tips to make it do better, to have this work out a lot better, you probably want to be able to describe the voids if you can. So starting on this frame might be advantageous to you, because if we start painting here, as the voids close and open, we're saying, I like this leg, I like this other leg, I don't like this void. But if you started on a frame like this, right, we're saying, I like this object, but we're not really getting to paint onto the legs. So being able to describe the voids, super helpful when we're thinking about propagating with the least number of spans possible. Now, Evan, why do you want to propagate with the least number of spans possible? Well, if this were a more high action type of thing instead of a nice smooth one, we might even come in here and say, well, I need to draw 2 spans, right? I need this to be, I'll just start redrawing, redraw two spans of this fella. And I need to do that because, you know, we're losing detail, or the subject is changing too much between these two areas. And this is where you need to really make some hard decisions about how am I going to actually break up this work in a meaningful way. So a big part of it is coming in here and saying, where can I define my spans? How do I do this in the least number of spans possible? The reason you likely will want to use fewer spans is because the changeover between the spans is when things can become noticeable. Even with the greatest of propagation and the most wondrous and smooth and excellent of definitions between the two, you can end up with sort of a hard cut where we are breaking from this span to this span. So unless you're applying a lot of diligence when it comes to refining the edges, making sure everything is nice and smooth, because the two of them are sort of coming from different places, right? This one is referencing way back here, and this one is referencing way up here. This point at which they break and they change over each other, in this case, we're not noticing it a huge lot, right? Because the model doesn't change, the person, model in this case, hasn't changed a whole lot, but you can notice a lot of interesting propagation troubles. Now, let's get into refining this. Let us refine this as we move. The tip for refining this, I say, make sure that you propagate as much of this as you like. Try to get it all green, and then we're going to scrub through, moving from the middle, moving from the place that we started our first frame, start moving backwards and look for any trouble areas that don't look right. So, and we want to look for when they first start looking wrong. So for example, here is where it starts to look wrong, that I need to remove this little bit in here where the thumb is. Okay, now let's take one step. Ooh, and that little correction has now propagated, has helped us to say what should change, right? And now this void looks a lot better. Let's keep moving. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So I'm just gonna reinforce that, hey, you're doing a great job in there. Any other interesting voids? Oh, it's picking that up. So let's chop that, but then we have to give that back. And we'll just kind of scrub back and forth a little. Oh yeah, so this is actually where that starts to fall off. So I'll just kind of say, hey, this dark part, we're not interested in that. Oh, and now it's corrected. It's course corrected all the way on this. Important, what is happening when we're giving these new suggestions? Come on down here into your timeline and look at all these little, how to describe this? It kind of looks like a bunch of tracks, right? Or if anyone ever used the old Fruity Loops digital music creator, it's kind of like we're setting down little notes. But these are little suggestions that actually live in time. So they're kind of trapped in amber a little bit here. But you can edit them and work with them. But what we're doing is we're dropping suggestions as we move further away from that key frame, that base frame here. And by sort of working a little bit at a time, trying to trace back to when did things fall off? When did things go wrong? And then we correct at that moment, and we'll have way fewer corrections to deal with. So for example, here is where things are going wrong. I'm just going to say, hey, oh, we're going to correct that. Oh, sorry, I got to do a little bit of correction back the other way. We'll go like that. Now those hints have now knocked that off. So then we just want to make sure that we are correcting, and we're given the best instructions that we possibly can. Remember, we do need to kind of scrub back and forth, making sure that these voids are getting filled in. Now that's one way of suggesting and fixing. But remember I said, you don't need to be so, let's say, fastidious about a lot of these things. So let's come into an area here where the void, the definition of the edge is not particularly good. So it's like he's wearing mittens at this point, right? So if we take this frame, for example, I'm going to jump back into our stuff composition. And what if we were to be putting stuff directly behind that hand? We'll just grab our stuff. You can see that it looks like he's wearing a mitten, right? Oops, oops, too much mitten. And that is because the edge is not refined enough in here. But refining it with vectors is going to be a little bit difficult. So let's get back into that subject, and we'll open up the Refine Edge brush. Now, we know the hand is a problem. So we want to kind of track back, when did things start to go wrong? Well, they actually started to go wrong right from the beginning because we didn't provide adequate edge information about the hand. So I'm just going to paint around the hand, boop, and you see it's gone black and white. So the white areas are totally opaque, the black areas are totally see-through, and it has undone all of our propagation. And that's because it has this new information to think about. And as I scrub through, you can see that it's keeping like this glove on the hand, right? And I want to make sure that the glove stays on the hand. So I might have to add a little bit here. And I might even want to take some away here because all I want to do is make sure I'm describing edge. What is edge? And so if this is really getting away from where the edge is, it's not going to be able to understand the edgeness of this area at all. So this area is a poorly defined edge. Oh, now it's perfectly defined. We nailed it. And so we can scrub through, but again, I want you to remember that thing I said. We have to go from when the problem started. Here is where the problem started. And now that is going to try to ride along and propagate along the edge. Keeping in mind, with our edge definition brush that we're layering this on, right? We're just trying to say, where is the edge? That's all we need to say. Where is that pesky edge? And as long as we're doing that job, we are in good shape. See, I just cleaned up some of the inside and the edge got a lot more distinct. I clean up a little bit of the inside, the edge gets more distinct. So as long as we are saying this, where these pixels happen to fall, that is edge, we're going to be in good shape. So we just keep kind of going through, and you might need to kind of mouse through. You might need to just click through using page up and page down. Those are your best friends. See, if we push the edge up in here, we get this little bit of gray moving up in there. Super important, because those are the pixels that will be semi-see-through that we need down the road. Now, let's make this a little bit smaller and say, hey, these dark pixels, wrong, not edge. So let's cut that out. Cut it out. You know, this is not edge. So we're always trying to say, this is edge, this is not edge. All right. Now, throughout this whole process, remember we're saying what is edge, what is not edge. There are different views that we can use to help us out. So here I'm going to click into, or out of, the mode that is showing us this black and white. I'll just hover over that and get into the technical. Toggle Refine Edge X-Ray. When we go into the pink mode, remember we have that nice solid pink line. Here we're getting a lot of variable pink line. And so we probably want to say, hey, that's not edge, because if we're getting pink stuff going on in there, that's not the edge, right? So you want to try to clean that out, clear it out. But between the fingers, I see a little bit of pink bleeding in there. That is edge. Let's leave that in there, right? So those are the decisions you're making, and these overlays are going to help you out. So for example, we can go into the, what we would say is the alpha. So this is the alpha channel, and you can see these indistinct zones. We can refine that even more. So here in our refine edge mat, I can say, hey, give us a little bit of contrast in there. And you see how much harder that edge got. It's not as soft. Maybe we want to go the other way. We want to soften it out so we can feather that edge. Be a little bit judicious with that, because as you can see, there's a difference between the area where you refined the edge and the area where you did not. If you want to have a consistent refinement going on, then you want to come in here and you want to make sure that you are giving us a little bit of base refine edge radius. Even a radius of 1 is going to be a little bit helpful. And you see how now that transition point is gone. It's been totally removed from this thing. And all we did was add 1 pixel of edge around the entire situation. Keep in mind, you're now going to have to monitor a little bit more rather than just the trouble areas, because we can use an amount of feathering and contrast in the regular sort of edge Rotobrush mat. So remember that those other areas are being defined by these matte settings, and these here are taking over for the more advanced areas. But, to improve performance, to make your life a little bit easier, before you start messing around with these values, you want to hit the freeze button. Now, I'm going to, cooking show style, just jump into the version that is already done. So we'll get into the track and extract here, and we'll have a look at just the guy. And after you freeze this down, everything goes blue and it's locked. Now that means that you can still mess with these controls here. If there's a lot of motion, you want to make sure that you are using motion blur. And that is going to, especially when this person is moving back and forth, right? Even though the shutter speed is pretty good, the motion blur is helping to bring that motion into the edge here so that I don't have to manually paint the edge of this person, right, all the time. I want to get the body of this person and let the sort of edge motion blur take over a little bit of that and bring that blurriness with it so that we're letting the computer do more of the labor here. Similarly, right, we are still shifting the edge. So if you shift the edge outwards or inwards, right, we're pushing this boundary towards or away from. And in this case, it's helpful to just make the boundary eat into the person a little bit, put a negative value in the shift edge, and that's going to expose more of the background. Now, this is just the first step. This is the first part of the thing. So we are going to get into, tomorrow, we're going to be getting into adding 3D things into the scene, not just little text layers like you've got in here, but we are going to be adding in all sorts of true 3D things when we fire up the After Effects beta. If you want to go ahead and rotoscope some stuff, put some stuff behind people, please do, and send it over on the Discord. We want to see that. So we're over on the Discord, bit.ly/PR Discord. So make sure that you get in there and send me the things. Show me how your roto is doing. And really, if you want to just send a screen capture of, show me that alpha boundary and how you're getting on with cutting out elements, send it in there. I'd love to have a look. If there's anything that's giving you trouble, maybe I can advise, on making it a little bit better. But again, it's a lot of process, a lot of technique. Remember, find where things went wrong, start from that point, move forward, move backwards, separate elements that may require more attention. The skateboard required a lot of attention. The person didn't require a lot of attention at all. So separate elements that way. I'm going to be back at you tomorrow to do the 3D object part. So hopefully I will see you then. We have a rich full day of activities coming to you next, so stay with us here on Adobe Live. There's a lot more to come, and I will also see you later on Behance if you're into that kind of thing. But stick around on Adobe Live and make sure that you stick around for more challenges this week. Thank you so much for being with me. Be kind to each other, stay creative, and I'll see you all around the internet. Bye for now.